Hello and welcome to this repair tutorial, and today we're going to look at an Arcam and the model number is Alpha 8R. In terms of general specifications, power output is 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms. This will increase to 100 watts if you connect 4 ohm speakers. Speaker impedance range is from 4 ohms minimum to 16 ohms. Frequency response is 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and total harmonic distortion comes in at 0.01%. Input sensitivity 275 millivolts for all of your line inputs, but you can connect the turntable directly with a moving magnet type cartridge, and input sensitivity there is 3 millivolts. The amplifier also supports a pre-amplifier output, so you can connect to additional power amplifiers if you wish, and this is 540 millivolts. And then on the rear you have a switch where you can select what is termed as processor input or normal, but I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. In terms of dimensions, height is 85 millimeters by a width of 430 and a depth of 330 millimeters, and the weight of the amplifier is 4.5 kilograms. The amplifier from new would have also been supplied with a small remote control, which gives you the ability to adjust the volume control and also place the amplifier into mute. And then here, when you take a top view, what you can see, very clean layout. As with all of these Arcam amplifiers, it's always high quality components, so you'll see that the capacitors are Rubicon, and you see at the left hand side there is a switchable moving magnet stroke line input selection with a single integrated dual operational amplifier. At the rear also you can see, just mounted on the back panel, this is this processor and normal switch, and then you can also see towards the front the motorized volume control. The large electrolytic smoothing capacitors for the power supply are underneath the foam material that you can just make out, and then on the right hand side is the toroidal transformer. This amplifier supports MOSFET type outputs, so you have two IRF or international rectifier 54N MOSFETs, one set for the left, one set for the right. So what was the issue with this amplifier when it came into the workshop? Well, as I'm indicating here, the first thing is that power input protection fuse had blown. Normally what this tends to indicate is that you have a short circuit somewhere on the circuit board. The most common cause of that, and what you can see here, is the failure of one or the other MOSFET output channels. So you can see this is the right hand channel, and in the background you can see the multimeter, and it's just indicating just slightly above 1 ohm. So that means that the MOSFET has gone short circuit, and hence why when the customer applies the power, the protection fuse is blowing. Now, what you need to do is really to remove the main amplifier circuit board and also the front mechanical cage, complete with the back panel, from the main chassis. So you have the screws on the rear and then also towards the front, and then you also have a series of silver fixing screws which are more grounding screws through the main PCB assembly, and then you also have the large toroidal transformer fixing bolt. And also just behind the toroidal transformer is a grounding screw. And then once you've done that, what you can do, as you see here, is to lift out the complete amplifier assembly and place it on the bench. Now, as with all amplifiers, and you see this throughout all of the tutorials, I always highlight particular areas that you need to focus on. So with these Arcam amplifiers, it is a straightforward systematic approach. So on the left hand side, as we work towards the right, what you can see are highlighted areas. So these, in the first instance, are the Phono RCA input sockets, and there will be dry joints on those. You can also see circles around the MOSFETs, again resolder, also the speaker terminals, the binding posts, the power input socket, and then as you move towards the front right, that is a headphone socket, and then the input switches. So this is for speaker set 2, also for the tone defeat, and then the tape input, and then we also have circles around the user control. So this is the balance, treble and bass controls. Also the input selection switch, but again we'll come back to that later, and then also the plus and minus 15 volt regulators. You need to resolder all of those connections. And then because of the age of this amplifier, there was also a requirement to replace the speaker protection relay because the contacts had become oxidized and also resistive, and that can lead to distortion or intermittent loss of sound. So I've put the part number in the description for the video, but I'm just highlighting to you this small Omron relay. And then the other area of concern is the input selection switch, and this is common on all of these Arcam series. So you need to desolder it from the circuit board, and what you can see here is that there is oxidization on the switching contacts. So it's the case that you use a high quality switch cleaner because you won't need to remove the original lubricating grease, because it becomes like an insulator and causes issues. And then just use a fiberglass pencil, just stroke the contacts, and what you'll see, a combination of the contact cleaner and the cleaning will bring those switching terminals back nice and bright, and then you can just apply some De-Oxit lubricating grease. If this is the first time you're looking to do this, what I would say is just take a series of photographs just so you know the correct orientation when you reassemble the switch. And then once you've done that, just install the switch back into the amplifier. Just push down onto the top of the circuit board to make sure the pins come all the way through, and then resolder. And then once you've done that cleanup, that will ensure that you have longevity and no issues associated with intermittent loss of sound or distortion. And then here on the back of the amplifier, what you can see is the processor and normal switch. The objective of this is, at a point in time, there were a lot of audio-visual units. So what Arcam were doing here was just to have a switch which provided a fixed gain input. For normal operation, that just means using it as a standard amplifier. That's the correct setting as you see here. The issue, what you can see, is that once you remove the switch, it's similar to the input selection switch. The contacts will have become oxidized and also resistive. So you can imagine this would have an impact, because as they go resistive, that will change the gain of the amplifier, and the level of resistance on each of those contacts would probably be very different. So again, high quality switch cleaner like De-Oxit, and then just use a fiberglass pencil just to restore those contacts back to normal with no resistance or oxidization. And then here what we also do is we remove the volume control circuit board stroke potentiometer. And if you spin it over, what you'll find is dry solder joints on all of those connections there. So just reflow them. And then the next part of the service and repair, after you replace the MOSFETs, the speaker protection relay, and of course the 1.6 amp time delay fuse, you need to use De-Oxit D5 and spray into these user controls. So I'll spray directly into all of the potentiometers, also into the switches, and you just need to work them backwards and forwards or operate the switches multiple times, and then that will then clear out oxidization or any dust and dirt, so you have reliable noise-free operation. And then here we just zoom in on the phono stage, and you can see the large multi-pin switch. Don't forget that when you're doing your cleaning. And then you can also see the microcontroller, which is just on the left hand side. And then as we come forward, just on the left again, you can see the plus and minus 15 volt regulators. And then the right hand side, you can also see the solid state switching for each one of the inputs. Once all that work is then completed, the next part of the service and repair is just to carry out the alignment or the bias adjustment for each one of the channels. So what I'm doing here is just showing you an extract from the service manual, and this is indeed the right channel, the one that failed. And I'm just highlighting that what you need to do is you need to measure across the resistors as indicated there, and then what we're doing is we are adjusting it until you have a reading of approximately 2.3 to 2.8 millivolts. So you could set it, for example, to 2.6. Just remember that when you make the adjustment, the amplifier normally is running for about 20 minutes. It's in a stable environment, so you don't have any drafts. And then once you make the adjustment, just wait a period of time for stabilization, and then just recheck the measurement again. And then here what we show is before the adjustment, and you can see that the left channel is running slightly high. Because we replaced the right hand channel MOSFETs, they were slightly low. But once we'd made the adjustment, and this is the same for each channel, you can see here that we just lined it up to 2.66 millivolts. And the amplifier probably ran for about 3 hours under test conditions, and then again rechecked to ensure that the bias adjustment here didn't change, which it didn't, and everything was stable and you had good operation. And then here we just show you a close-up view of the parts that have been removed. So these are the international rectifier 54Ns. There you can see the input protection fuse and also the speaker protection relay. As with any amplifier repair, just be very careful where you're sourcing your replacement parts. If you look and you find, for example, MOSFETs available for a very, very low price, there probably is the case that they are counterfeit or they are fake. So you need to source from trusted and always source genuine original electronic components. The last thing you want to do is put a fake component in there and then power up, and then you find the amplifier fails during normal operation. And then finally, once all that work has been done, you can see here the amplifier has been cleaned. This amplifier, like many of these Arcams, it's well worth taking the time to do the service work Just make sure that you do all the age-related faults, and once you've done all of that, you should find that this amplifier now would run for many, many years, providing excellent audio quality. So that brings us to the end of this repair tutorial. So if you have any questions or you need any guidance, by all means email audioamplifierservicing@aol.com, and I'll be more than happy to come back to you and provide any support that you may require. So until the next time, wish you all the very best. Cheers and bye-bye.